Okay, hello everybody. My name is Ben Bowler. Welcome back to World Unity Week. We got a real treat for you in this session, something that is so inspiring, and I'm really looking forward to this juicy dialogue all around the evolutionary value, or really the essential aspect of partnership. And I'm really delighted to be joined by three evolutionary leaders: Roger Briggs, Amanda Sanders, and Dr. Kurt Johnson from the Partnership Network of the EL Circle, the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. And as champions of conscious evolution, we're drawing upon the inspiration of groundbreaking pioneer of Riane Eisler in illuminating the power of partnership as a guiding principle for the future of humanity. In a world still dominated by systems of control and hierarchy, this dialogue explores how shifting to a partnership model rooted in mutual respect, collaboration, and care can catalyze personal, cultural, and planetary information. And Kurt and Roger, Amanda, welcome. Welcome to World Unity Week. It's a delight to have you with us. I'm going to say a little bit about each of our speakers, and then we're going to get into it. I think everybody knows Kurt Johnson has worked at the intersection between science and spirituality for over 40 years, probably closer to 50 years now, and serves on many, many international committees at the United Nations. He's really at the core center of the synergy circles of the evolutionary leaders. He's been a key part of the emergence of Unity Earth. His work with the Interspiritual Dialogue Network has been profound, and now with Light on Light, transformational publishing, doing incredible work in publishing books such as the Evolutionary Leaders, Our Moment of Choice, and the Hollow Movement book, and many, many others, including the anthology coming up very soon on the 25th anniversary of Wayne Teasdale's The Mystic Heart. Kurt's a polymath that's really at the center of so much of what's emerging. So couldn't imagine having this partnership conversation, Kurt, without you right in the middle of it. Now, Amanda, once described as the most interesting woman in the world, Amanda Sanders is a former tech entrepreneur who has done 11 startups, 2 unicorns, and advised many Fortune 500 and Global 1000 companies, including Apple, Visa, Wells Fargo, Verizon, Southwest, Honda, and many other widely known brands. Amanda is currently a conscious venture capital investor, corporate director, and strategic advisor, helping high growth companies achieve their highest potential. Amanda also spends her time teaching startup founders and corporate executives consciousness through the lens of quantum physics and neuroscience in her groundbreaking Growth Catalyst program that works through Startup Accelerator Venture Capital Fund and anywhere companies are being grown. As an evolutionary leader, Amanda's passions and skills for global scaling and next generation collaboration creation are put to work with the group's collective efforts for positive worldwide transformation. Amazing. Looking forward to getting to know you and your work a little better today, Amanda, and I'm sure many others as well. Speaking of scaling, Roger Briggs spent his professional career in the American public schools as an award-winning physics teacher, team builder, and program developer, always with an eye towards creating environments that maximized human thriving and performance through partnership. His love of the mountains and nature found expression in rock climbing, where he pioneered many cutting-edge first ascents. Since retiring in 2006, he wrote the books Journey to Civilization and Emerging World, which inspired the Planet Project. Roger now works at the global level, serving the great transition to an ecological civilization and partnership culture. Roger is also coordinator of the Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, working very closely with Dr. Kurt Johnson. So, wow, what an amazing, eminent, and powerful panel come together. So, Kurt, let's kick it off with you. Tell us about the power of partnership. You are an authority on this subject in so many ways, but tell us why it's essential to our human evolution and maybe even human survival.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really wonderful to be here with Roger and Amanda, who I get to work with all the time. And Ben, you and I have been working together for nearly a decade now with what became Unity Earth. And even if we think of Unity Earth, we could ask the question, what would Unity Earth be, or that dream, if it wasn't about partnership? So when I look out at all the people who I know are on this program, because they're all a part of the community we're a part of, take a look. Everything that you've achieved, everything that you're proud of and that you've been really thrilled to give to the world, That's been achieved by partnerships, and those partnerships have been thrilling for you. They've been fulfilling for you. Look at your personal life. If you're in a wonderful relationship and in a family, what's that all about? It's all about partnership. Now, it's interesting when we look at the world now, going on 9 billion people and in a very resource stressed environment, really have to ask ourselves, where is the future for our planet and for our ecology and 9 billion people if it's not about partnership? Now, the Dalai Lama is interesting when he talks about children. He says, look at children. They don't have a ranking system. They don't care what color you are, what country you're from, or what flag you're behind. They just want to smile. They want to have a good time. So what's weird about the world that we live in, and we have to identify it, and Amanda will be talking about this, and Roger particularly in talking about Riane Eisler's work. It's so deeply embedded, sometimes we don't even see it, but we live in a domination system. All of our cultures are domination systems. Business is a domination system. Politics, economics, it's all about winners and losers and about ranking system of who's in and who's out. Now that can work in the short run, and our entire world history is based on that. And actually the fisticuffs that come from that, which are all about war as opposed to peace. And of course, peace is one of the huge themes of everything that Unity Earth and all of our community does. So this is where we're at, and Riane talks so deeply insightful about this. We've got to make this turn, identifying that domination systems do not have a future except the catastrophes you can see by just switching on the TV. That's as far as you got to look to see what domination systems are doing. And we've got to come to a partnership consciousness and then evolve it into a partnership culture. So I think the others will talk more about this. It's so fundamental, but particularly the insights that Riane Eisler has had in her famous book, The Chalice and the Blade. That pointed it out for the first time. What's the difference between the chalice and the blade? And how has that dominated our entire history? And which way do we have to go to have a future that would actually work, for everybody? So I think that's a good start, and turn it over to the rest of us.
Yeah, wonderful, Kurt. Thank you very much. And it's absolutely so true that everything great that's been achieved really through this evolutionary community has been done in partnership. By definition, you can't really do it as a silo, as on your own. And not always easy, though, Amanda, is it, to get to transcend our own organizational, personal perspectives, vested interests, et cetera, to actually achieve, collaboration, synergy, collective empowerment. These are ideals, and there is a certain. I love the experience that you've got in the tech, in the entrepreneurial world, in the commercial world, of how these can be applied in reality to actually get grounded, tangible results. So looking forward to hearing your perspective on partnership and the evolutionary value of partnership today.
I am so glad that we've come pretty far from where we were, and yet we still have pretty far to go. But when I first started in business quite a few decades ago, it was all about your startup had to beat everyone. Like, I mean, if you weren't the last person standing, then your startup failed. And now it's nothing like that. It is all about how to get the partnerships in place. Your moat as a startup is the relationships, the partnerships that you establish from day one of your business. And that is, to me, 180-degree change in the proper direction. So when we started talking about this, I thought, how much of this is, just newer companies, and how much of this is, the older companies that have been around longer. And so I looked up some statistics just to see, right? Because you don't want just your reflection of what's going on in the world. And here's what's interesting. 75% of all CEOs that were interviewed in technology, media, and telecommunications, which are often grouped together as the TMT sector, said that partnerships were critical to their business success. So this isn't just, a little niche in, the startup Silicon Valley area that I've been in. 82% of B2B companies, so business to business selling companies, plan to increase the number of partners they had, and 70% of them were increasing the partnership department budgets. So putting money behind what you say you're going to do. We know that that's important when business is actually willing to put money behind it. 75% of world trade now flows indirectly through channels, partnerships, alliances, underscoring the systemic importance of partnership in our global economy. I mean, if this wasn't our current model, I mean, we would grind to a halt with the way that we currently view the global world. And here was, to me, the most interesting piece. This is the front page of the UN's document on how to achieve the SDGs. So when they looked at, the 2030 goals, the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations put out, and they said, well, doesn't look like we're making the progress we need to make. What are some ideas that we have? They put out a lot of documents, but one of the ones that they put out explicitly focused on the fact that partnership was the key way in which all of this was going to happen. And on page 1, above the fold, I just want to read it line by line. It says, the importance of partnership has been recognized fully by the UN, by business, and by all leading institutions in international development. The 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the blueprint for global development, represent a fundamental shift in thinking, explicitly acknowledging the interconnectedness of prosperous business, a thriving society, and a healthy environment. They name all societal sectors as key development actors and require an unprecedented level of cooperation, collaboration among civil society, business, government, NGOs, foundations, and others for all of the achievement of the SDGs. So, to me, that is really looking at partnership. This isn't just businesses partnering. This isn't just people partnering, but this is for the prosperity of any of these. This is the partnering with society, the environment, businesses, health, people, all of it's partnering together. I really loved that. So I'll leave it there for the moment.
That's wonderful, Amanda, and thank you. It's really across the whole field. The value of partnership is across the whole field, and we probably think, a lot in World Unity Week, and the networks and the partnerships. The Evolutionary Leaders Partnership Network is an example, often about civil society, organizations, NGOs, individuals with platforms and groups coming together, and that level of partnership. But boy, if it's really taking root and hold in the commercial world and in the corporate world and in the world where the bottom lines, have such sway and influence, then there's an opportunity to achieve that real impact. If the ideal of partnership, and we're talking in World Unity Week about truth, beauty, and goodness, and I think there's some resonance there between those themes and the values of these partnerships. But if it's taking hold in the tech world, in the business world, in the entrepreneurial world, then that's good news for everyone, because there's an ability to get traction and a scale to reach impact, which business can achieve, that civil society can probably only really dream of, the way that business can impact the world across short time frames. So that's amazing. Thank you for bringing that. That's a really expanding kind of viewpoint for all of us. So Roger, I know this is an area which you are super passionate about, and really dedicated a lot of your own mission to now the creation of the Evolutionary Leaders Media Collaboratory, and the other kind of think tanks that are coming together to not just explore the idea of partnership, but to execute and to formalize and to continue to ground into the real world. So tell us a little bit about what you're excited about. I know that there's a big event coming later in the year. We want to make sure everybody gets on board with, under the visionary guidance and inspiration of Riane Eisler. But Roger, we're looking forward to hearing your sharing.
Thanks, Ben. I might just start and say a little bit about the idea of partnership. And I think there's kind of an old paradigm understanding of partnership, like it's sort of a transactional thing. Two businesses, two entities get together and more or less trade is sort of a business deal. Um, but I think really we're talking about partnership consciousness, and it's really a worldview. It's really a seeing the interconnectedness. And I think for partnerships to occur, there always has to be a sort of a third player other than the two partners, which is the shared vision, the higher purpose that you both share. And when that becomes the focus, and it doesn't matter who gets credit, who gets the better end of the transaction. So that shared purpose, I think, is really important. Um, I think partnership has a lot of interesting to hear Amanda talk about in the business sector. I come from a very different world. My career was in the public schools, and I spent 30 years with kids, and I just naturally had a sense of I didn't want to be an authority figure. I wasn't there to, have power over them or jerk them around, and so I found that I just naturally gravitated towards this view of things like let's work together. Let's be on the same page. I'm still the teacher, and there still is these different roles. But I was phenomenally successful as a teacher because of partnership. Even in the realm of sports, I coached high school cross country distance runners, and um, again, I wasn't cracking the whip. It wasn't about external motivators and all that. In fact, internal motivation was my goal. I wanted kids to run because they wanted to, and make that choice. It's up to you. Don't do it for me. So it comes out in so many different places. But one thing I want to sort of bring up about Riane's work is it's really the story that she revealed, and I think she was the first. And we talk about the new narrative that we have to have, and she pointed out this profound change that happened about 5,000 years ago in what we call the beginning of civilization. And historians talk about that's when history began and writing was invented, and it's really the history of domination culture, all the wars and the kings. It's just endless right through till today. But what's so compelling in the story that she tells in The Chalice and the Blade is the period before that, the 5,000 years before then, the so-called Neolithic period. And there were these civilizations on Crete and in Turkey and in Eastern Europe, and they were partnership cultures, partnership societies where men, you can tell from the art that men and women were in partnership. It wasn't matriarchal, it wasn't patriarchal. There was a lot of equality. The civilization on Crete, the Minoan civilization, is just phenomenal that she paints such a beautiful picture of. And it was the last of the partnership societies to survive before all this changed when it's been attributed to what's called the Kurgan invasions out of the Asian steppes, probably the area around Ukraine. These nomadic horsemen with weapons came and just literally slaughtered all these beautiful partnership societies, and they had to start building walls and learn to defend themselves and commit war and all these things. So very suddenly, 5,000 years ago, you get the pyramids and the palaces and the temples, which means you've got an emperor and you've got slaves. You have this ranking society. And the biggest thing that got ranked 5,000 years ago was women were placed under men. And it was not always that way. And that's one of the big messages from Riane. It was not always that way. Humans are not fundamentally warlike. Men are not fundamentally superior to women, should be in charge. This is a culture that has just been pounded in for 5,000 years. And so here we are, it's all collapsing. And, what's the way forward? People all over are discovering partnership in business. I think the reason it resonates in business is because it brings results. I mean, I got results from the partnership things I did. I've worked in another nonprofit sector where we formed partnerships with government entities and businesses, and all for a common purpose. We were taking care of the climbing areas in the mountains. That was the shared purpose. And we shook loose $1 million because there was trust, like we all share this common purpose. So that's kind of what we're trying to create in the Media Collab, is to get organizations to see sure, you've still got to promote your organization. That's, we set these boundaries where we work, but what is the higher purpose? I think our shared purpose for all of us is we're trying to get humanity through this critical period to this new world that we envision. That's our shared purpose. And I don't care if who gets credit for that, if it just happens. So we're coming together into partnership. That's the future of our species.
I love it. Thank you, Roger. Thank you for taking us on that, kind of journey through history, inspired by Riane and her work, and through the different dynamics that have shown up in history over the millennia that lead us to today. And it's interesting, the idea of a shared purpose as kind of the thing that brings us together. I think, Kurt, the work of pro-social is one that also, like many of these modalities, identify shared purpose as kind of a starting point. But let's talk a moment about the challenges of partnership, because it's a real thing. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it, and we'd all be there, right? And I know that, the experience with pro-social took a lot of inspiration from Elinor Ostrom and the 2009 Nobel Prize for Economics, which talked about these design principles of how to manage the commons. And out of that, you got all these different modalities of, how do we navigate conflict? How do we navigate tension? Like Roger, you just said before, different organizations have got different needs, their brand, their funding, their identity, their own, discrete purpose. How do we manage it when we come into partnership where there's disagreement? What are the best tools and techniques? We're not expecting it all to be easy and all to just flow and be beautiful. There are challenges and rocky roads along the way, and I know all three of you have experienced navigating this successfully. So, Kurt, let's start with you. What are some of the principles for dealing with the challenges of partnership, the inevitable challenges of partnerships as individuals and as discrete organizations or entities?
Yeah, so I'm going to say a little bit about Lynn Ostrom's work that she won the Nobel Prize on, because then I can loop right back into Riane's 4 cornerstones of how this works, and then back to Lynn Ostrom and how then we deal with it. So actually what Lynn Ostrom won her Nobel Prize was for addressing the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is what we're all familiar with, is that when human beings try to work together, their results often aren't that great. And usually they can go downhill until finally there's even conflict. And she was asking, what are the fundamental things that cause that? And what are the ways then that we can get out of that? Now, what Riane points out is that whether you're moving toward domination or you're moving toward partnership, they share the same 4 cornerstones. The first cornerstone is, what was your experience in childhood? If you grew up in a family that was loving and in partnership, you grow up with a sense of everything you built with your defense mechanisms, the way you operate is based on that sense that you were loved, you were in partnership. If you grew up in a violent household, then you come out of that as a wounded person who becomes a wounder, somebody who was bullied who becomes a bully. And she points out that one thing that Vladimir Putin did in Russia to solidify his dictatorship was to decrease the legal penalties for family violence, because he knew if you grew up in a violent household, you're ready for what a violent culture is going to ask you to do. So the next cornerstone then is the beginning of the ranking systems. And the most basic one is the attitude that a culture has about gender. But it's all not only just about that, but any ranking system based on race, based on sexual preference of who's in, who's out, who has privileges and who doesn't. Third cornerstone then is how the economic system of that culture sustains that ranking system. Now you can see that really clearly, that the gender imbalance and the racial imbalance gets perpetuated by the economic system. And then the fourth one, which is so important, what is the story that culture tells? And we're all familiar, particularly with cultures that have told women, oh, this is all you're about. You can't be educated. You can't hold a job. You can't drive a car. And even women will believe that if the story of that culture, especially if it's in counseling religion, convinces them that, again, that's the way it is, right? And so, so it's interesting that the movement toward partnership or the movement toward domination uses really based on those same four cornerstones. So what Lynn Ostrom said then, if you look at her principles, they're all about how you recognize where the inequalities are and where the imbalances are, and you address those in really skillful ways. But what we discovered in our experience with that is it's not enough, because what's unique to spiritual communities, I want to say the evolutionary leaders, the Polo movement, whatever it is, in the secular world, and that was the world in which Lynn won her Nobel Prize, it's very difficult for those folk, particularly academics and people who are very egoic and very intellectual, to lean into what partnership would mean and to find a win-win together. They don't have the patience for it. They more often take their marbles and go home, have an argument. Very often in the United Nations, that's what it is. It's argue, 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 who has the best ideas, take your marbles and go home. What's amazing about the importance of what we're doing in our communities is we have this ability to lean in together and ask, what would a win-win really look like? And what do I have to give and you have to give in order that we find a win-win together? And that's why the underlying spiritual consciousness, unity consciousness, partnership consciousness is fundamental to making partnership work. Because many people have tried it just with the mind. It's not enough. It's got to happen with the heart and that deep, deep resonance that comes from the arts. And there it is, truth, goodness, and beauty. Those are going to orient you right toward the skills that you need to really find partnership.
Oh, wow. That's great, Kurt. Thank you so much. Beautifully kind of wrapped up there. And I think you touched on some very important things. The culture of the dominant paradigm, it leads to a belief in individualism, self-determinism, which can become very difficult, Amanda, in trying to then create authentic win-win partnerships with others. So what are sort of the role of mediation or the role of facilitation, or how do we navigate these inherent tensions between the individual's self-expression and the potential of what the group can do?
Well, I think it takes an evolution of perspective, right? So if we all stay exactly where we are in our own evolution, then we're just standing in our own perspective, looking out, fighting for, but I want, but I want, but I want, and it's just the I. But we've known that we've been evolving for a long time, right? So we can make up all these rules and bring in facilitators and processes and punishments and all sorts of old ideas for how to make this happen. Or we can observe that we've been evolving to this the whole time. As long ago as 1959, Peter Drucker called this out. And he's known as a visionary in sort of business and industrial terms, but a lot of people don't know that if you really read into some of his stuff, he actually sort of foresaw this partnership model coming out into the future. And the way that he talked about it, so he's well known for coining the term knowledge worker, and he coined it at a time where everyone worked in manufacturing. And no one could conceive of what it meant to be a knowledge worker, right? No one worked at computers. Everyone was paid in simple terms for their hands. That's how he simplified it. You were valued for your hands, right? Mostly doing labor or things that you could produce. And he said, there's a time, it's coming, you will be valued for your head. And people were like, no, it's not possible that in mass, an entire country and then an entire world can have mainly people getting their paycheck for their heads. How will we have products? Who will make things? We can't, our economy will collapse. But look around in the US, not every country is at the same stage, but at least in the US, and there are quite a few countries that are predominantly knowledge workers, all valued for their heads. And it all seems very normal to us. But back in the manufacturing age, in the industrial age, We couldn't conceive of it. But here's the part very few people know. When he actually talked about that, and it was so inconceivable, he also said, hey, guess what? After that, we will all be valued for our hearts. And I think that's partnership. That is where we're going, because our hearts don't live alone. Our hearts don't care what Amanda wants. Our hearts care about Amanda and Roger and Ben and Kurt and the earth and the community. And our hearts are a collective by nature, right? Our hearts care about all of the above and us individually, right? Not at the sacrifice of us. And so it is naturally a win-win. And as we evolve there, and what is that conception? I have no clue. We are standing now where everyone was in the industrial age going, are you kidding me? There's no way everyone will be paid and valued for their minds. That's not possible. We're in that same spot, right now, as we're all valued for our minds, going, what does it mean to be valued for our hearts? But I think Peter had it right. I think that's where we're going. I think we're seeing it. I think we're just in that weird, crunchy phase of transition. And so I don't know that a lot of ruling or processing or making up ways to make this happen is needed. I think just a bit of doulaing or shepherding or whatever word we'd like to use to just help maybe hasten it is maybe all that's needed.
Beautiful. Love that, Amanda. That's wonderful. And very, I think it gives us a great sense of optimism that this is the way we're heading and that the culture is evolving from the hand to the head to the heart over this journey. Thank you for bringing that. It's a wonderful, kind of paradigm shift and, just easing into it then or going with it, the evolutionary flow. It may be sufficient for us just to, allow the partnership model and the partnership consciousness to arise and to continue to flourish. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing that. So Roger, all of this is really, again, a fulfillment. We heard about Peter Drucker, we've heard about Riane Eisler, there's, Lil Ostrom, the various thought leaders that have gone into kind of generating, the opening the doors for us. So what does it look like now for us to step through it together and to really be agents of conscious partnership in 2025? What can we do with hearts, heads, and hands to further advance this collective evolution?
Yeah, well, what Amanda just articulated was so beautiful. I'd never thought of partnership as really the integration of head and heart. And there is so much heart in partnership. It's about caring in these so-called feminine qualities, which of course we all have and can cultivate. I think one of the barriers, and you alluded, Ben, a little bit to this tension within organizations, and it's about paradox, really. And I find that paradox is a theme that comes up over and over when we talk about things people struggle with, but also this so-called higher consciousness is about really, I call it embracing paradox, that it's no longer a paradox. And the paradox, for example, is the individual versus the collective. So, we of course champion individualism and, going out there, the self-made man and all that. And some people will say, well, the collective, well, we don't want to be like ants or bees or something where you're just mindless workers. So there's this paradox, like it's got to be either or. And I'm going with the individual. I want to be a powerful man. But they can coexist. And, this is the yin and the yang, I think, really is what Lao Tzu was trying to capture, is the integration of opposites. And there's no tension. So that you can be an individual in a collective. You can be an organization within an ecosystem of organizations. So I think that's a stumbling block. It's a bit of a barrier. And we're still into these polarities, these either ors. Winning and losing is a great one. Like the idea of a win-win, that's like, well, hold it. No, there's got to be winners and losers, right? So, we're punching through these barriers, I think. And It's certainly happening. But as far as the future, I mean, I'll go with heart opening. The more we can open people's hearts, and caring and love and all these things, that's maybe what it's going to really take.
Beautiful. Oh, I think that's a great place for us to be arriving at this collective realization that it's the way of the heart. And I think the mystics have been talking about this for forever. And we've got a big event coming up in November, Roger. Why don't you? Let's go there. Let's go to the big plans for November because we're all on board with this. Unity Earth, in our own way, is very proud to be a big, a small part of this bigger thing that's unfolding. But what's happening in November? What should people know about?
Well, I'll say a few things and also let Kurt chime in because we're both working with a woman named Gina in Ireland who's just phenomenal. That's the lead, the powerhouse on this. But the date is actually October 29th. It's not quite November. There will be a new website up within a few days that we're going to start putting out. But it's called the Peace Begins at Home Summit. This is one of Riane's dreams, kind of a legacy dream, is to do this. But it's the basic concept that Kurt talked about, that what happens in the home scales fractally out to society. And so, addressing those first 5 years. And so there's a pretty stellar cast of speakers. It's a virtual event. And there's a lot of center of gravity and a lot coming together around this. And maybe I'll turn it over to Kurt to say a few more things.
Yeah, so where this initiative came from is actually part of a cluster of initiatives that Riane brought to us when she became an evolutionary leader. And it really, the larger, and there's a website for this too, the larger moniker is connecting the dots. In other words, everything that we just talked about, if we're going to get the message of this last 45 minutes, it's because we connect the dots between everything that we talked about. So all of these other initiatives are really a subset of us connecting the dots. And you can go to Riane Eisler, connectingthedots.com, which is one of the original websites that we put up when we started working with Riane. And from that, she wanted to ask the fundamental question from Cornerstone 1. And that's the question about, the experience in childhood. Because I've been in a lot of meetings today. A lot of you were there. People talked about youth. And are youth going to be the way forward in the future? The people that are young now that are going to inherit this planet, are they going to have the deep inherent values that could actually take this world where we want to go? It's going to depend in a tremendous degree on what happened to them in their childhood, because even the neuroscience says that's embedded in the first 5 years, that even how you vote is embedded in the first 5 years. So Peace Begins at Home came from that. But there's another part that's also a part of what you're doing, Ben, with World Unity Week, and what John Raymer is doing with Solstice Unites. And that's the sub-program Arts for a Partnership Culture. And Arts for a Partnership Culture, which John's investing in, and we're going to move on to as we start building out Riane's initiatives, ask this fundamental question about the world of the heart, which we come to understand through the arts because they appeal directly to that part of our nature. And how does that give us the quickest straight line to how we get to that sense of partnership, again, through truth, beauty, goodness, awe, wonder, all those qualities of the child that the Dalai Lama talked about, where the ranking system simply doesn't exist. So all these things are things Riane brought forward. It's interesting. She's a Holocaust survivor. She grew up in the slums of Cuba when that was the only place she could go when they fled from the Nazis as a little girl. She's seen it all. And so she is so dedicated to trying to unravel this pretzel along with the rest of us in the human race. So Peace Begins at Home is going to be a big part of that.
Amazing. And I think Riane's in her 90s, I believe, Kurt. So, for her to be kind of, stimulating and catalyzing these big scale movements and events at this stage, what a powerhouse. And great to know about all these things that are coming through. And very happy to see them continue to grow, and they're big and they're important. And then how does all this take root in our mainstream culture? Amanda, I'm particularly interested in your experience when, you're having these conversations with executives or startups or hard-nosed CEOs, and you're telling them it's all about the heart. How do you find, you must have observed over the last, 10, 20, 30 years, the transformation in the conversations you're having, but also the response that you're receiving back. What would you say about where the culture is right now in relation to this?
Well, I think more people are open today than ever before. The work that I do, I approach it more from a science perspective. I do speak more in neuroscience and quantum physics perspectives. And the reason I do is it lowers the barrier of the logical mind's desire to fight anything new. And we have put, at least in the Western world, science on a pedestal. And we're like, oh, well, if science says, oh, right. But science is lagging behind, right? I forget who said that famous quote that magic is just that which can't be proven by science yet, right? And every year new stuff is proven by science that wasn't proven last year. And so did that make it not real last year and it is real this year? Or, and so I find it interesting, as to me, I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, right? And I've been in software engineering my whole life. So you don't get any more sciencey than me, as far as, I'm just a math science nerd. And my whole house the husband is a software architect. And so all we do is birth nerds. FYI, that's what happens when you put our DNA together. You just get a house full of nerds. If you wonder. And so, I may gravitate somewhat towards the science, but to me, I don't need the science. The experience and the truth, and being able to feel and resonate with truth versus falsity is way more interesting. But we've lived in this surface world of putting certain things on a pedestal, science being a big one, the logical mind, the thinking mind being another really big one. And yet when you learn about the neuroscience, you learn how small the tool is of the thinking mind and how huge the rest of the mind that isn't the part you go to 1,000 years of school for. FYI, it's 99.99999% of the processing in your brain happens not in the part you're teaching it to do in school. So your little iPhone or Android phone has more processing power than that little part you're teaching everything in school. But we have these beliefs, right, that it's so important. And so rather than fight that, we go with it. Because if you go with it and then everybody puts their defenses down, and you just say, okay, look, you want science? Here's all the science that shows that, because there's an enormous amount of science that can be your entry door. Then we use those entry doors. But in the end, what happens is everyone's life changes, because what you have is an experience. You have things that are an experientially different world. It's the difference between deciding that you're all on your own and you have to go it alone, and the world sucks and everyone's out to get you, and no one is here to have your back, and you live in a generous world where everyone here is here to support you, and that no matter what, you cannot fail, and that every person has your back, and that they're all here with good intentions. And everything you do, even going to the grocery store, feels different if you're one versus the other. And ironically, the more you understand about quantum physics and probabilistic universes that we live in, and I won't go into all the science, you actually start to realize you do create a different reality when you start to carve those differences and change those beliefs. So that's what I see every day. I use the science to crack open the door, but from public company CEOs down to startups that are working out of their garage, we watch these very logical minded people who've never been introduced to these topics at all drop into their heart and operate in a world full of interconnectedness, understanding all that is, and even without knowing what the word partnership is, start to operate from this, what we introduce as more the quantum perspective or the connected perspective, of really being able to resonate with what they're doing rather than efforting like a bull in a china shop through this world.
Yeah, amazing. Great, isn't it? Great strategy. You got to speak a language that they're going to relate to. And, if science is emerging, science is telling us what the mystics from all traditions have been saying, and indigenous cultures for tens of thousands of years have been saying, then maybe we ought to listen. So Roger,
turns out they knew something.
Roger, as we're closing today, it's been such a rich conversation, but it strikes me that, maybe not everyone might know, but you're a legend in the field of rock climbing, what you've been able to achieve and the summits that you were the first to ever climb. And I can't think of too many more pursuits that are less about partnership mindset than rock climbing. I know you got your ground team and you got your support crew and all that, but at the end, you're there. Breaking new ground as an individual where no other individual has been before. It's a powerfully, kind of individual experience. And I just wonder, what are the lessons on the rock face about partnership, about truth, beauty, and goodness did you learn when you were breaking new ground as a rock climber?
Well, it's funny. I climbed for 60 years. That's a 6-0, and kind of hung it up a year ago. But it's all about reflecting on that. And there were so many spiritual lessons from climbing. And, today we have climbing gyms indoor, and that's a completely different thing. We were out in wild, wild places in nature, but pretty much always with a partner. You go, there's two of you, and there's no ground to, this is rock climbing where it's just you and one other person. And so the dynamics of personality, and you find the right partner and you go back over and over. And I had many very sacredly close partners, but a lot of it too is about, and this was just what I learned myself as a climber, is listening to my heart. Because when you're on the lead and no one's ever been there before, you're kind of reading spontaneously the situation. And meanwhile, your body, you're fatigued and you're running out of gas, and you better do it fast. You can't hang around and ponder too long. So I found I always had a lot of intuition about what to do. And I think that came from my heart. So there's so many lessons. I view it as a spiritual practice, self-responsibility, dealing with difficult things.
Beautiful, magnificent. Thank you, Rob. We could do a whole program on the spiritual lesson. Good.
Did you ever feel a communion with the cliff and the mountain, that you were leaning into a resonance with the mountain itself that was a kind of partnership?
Well, yes, actually very deeply. I mean, rocks, these places we climb are these incredibly beautiful things that Mother Earth created. But actually, I don't even know, creating a union with the rocks was an experience I had. When things were really happening, the so-called flow state, you're kind of at one with the rock and what nature provides you. And so.
That's a beautiful question and a wonderful answer. And Kurt, just as a final word for you, when they're giving away awards for partnership culture and the partnership consciousness, I think you would be right at the top of the list. And in terms of as we close today and you just expanded our conversation beyond the human to partnership with nature elders, and partnership with the unseen world, and partnership with all manner of beings that may be with us in this journey. Let's hear from you, Dr. Kurt Johnson, and the final, where can it take us? How far can it go, this partnership culture?
Well, I always think of a woman I was very close to, who was the dean at one of our seminaries, and she used to say, the older I get, the less I know. And I start to identify with that more and more, and also of not taking myself seriously, so that the skills and the relationships that we're talking about, just by that inherent partnership with what we're doing or the situation we're in, can just run itself. And I think that when we're all talking about freedom and well-being, that's the type of freedom and well-being that we're talking about, is that freedom to have that really intimate relationship with everything we're interconnected to. So we're actually just in a flow state in the sense of the whole quantum field that we're in, to use Amanda's term, and we're just in that matrix and just having a great time surfing that matrix.
It's a great time. It's fun. It's rich. It's good news. It's a celebration, and it's a communal experience of communing endlessly and infinitely. Thank you, Kurt Johnson. Thank you, Amanda Sanders, and thank you, Roger Briggs. This has been a wonderful and rich dialogue and discussion on partnership. Keep your eyes out for these events coming October and all the other things that are emerging and unfolding. It's going to be a wild ride. Thanks for being with us.